shame.
Lucia. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
The evil Zoom that interferes in our evenings. It's just too easy.
The evil Zoom, exactly.
So do I just put this AI companion thingy on? Sorry, I've never used it before, so
I think so. And as
I'm not sure.
It doesn't work. It's a good place to experiment as well and see what comes out the other end.
Okay.
And
Whatever.
then you have a transcription if we want to, like if you eventually want like write a few paragraphs on.
Okay, so I've asked it to transcript in English.
That's perfect. Well done.
Okay.
These new things. It's like when we first got smartphones, you see, and then in a few years we won't know how we managed without it. Okay, I think I'm going to get started. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a Tuesday evening. I'm sitting in East London, also very, very hot. But we're definitely actually making this an opportunity to record it. And please be clear, this is not a definitive, this is the way you must do the training set that we are doing tonight. It's just, we've just run the first WUSU training at WUSU in East London last week on Thursday and Friday. And I always find when you're actually doing the training, you sort of notice the ins and outs and you pick up various things that need to happen. So what we've done is just from what we've experienced on the 13th or 14th, I've created some potential suggestions of how you could do your training. But I really want you to feel free that if you feel this is something like one of the modules is one of your pet modules and you've got a particular way on how you teach that module, you are very welcome to not use any of this. So it's really just it's not prescriptive at all, I think is the summary there. I'm going to basically run very quickly. It's not going to be a very long meeting. And we're basically going to break it into sections to look first at the administration of an actual training in terms of how you organize the training and some of the things you need to keep in mind. And then we're going to run through each module quickly, and I'll just show you how we did it at WUSU and also give you some ideas of alternative ways of doing that. Feel free to put questions in the chat. Lucille's going to be with us for the first half hour, so she can help chair if things come up. But at the end of each little section, we will have time for questions and interaction if there's particular issues that's come up. So in the this first little section that we want to look at in terms of organizing your SWAT training at your university is just looking at some of the administration that needs to happen. And we are very fortunate that we have Lucille from the SAAFP, who is the administrator of this training. So no matter at which university you are, she will actually help you with all the administrative aspects. And the SAAFP has actually got the contract to roll out this training. And so they do have some finances available to help us with this training. And so she's going to be the main person you're going to be communicating with. So we have created, this is just to show you a nice summary of what the course looks like. And the way to understand it is that the course has got 4 modules, and each module has an online component and a face-to-face component. So module 1, as you guys know, is the emotional competence unit, know yourself, your learner, and your environment. Module 2 is focusing on giving feedback. Module 3 is focusing on the nuts and bolts of doing a WBA, including on how to fill in the WBA form. And Module 4 is focusing on entrustment decisions and the clinical competency committee. And the asynchronous section will be the same no matter where in the country you are. And that all happens through the Learn at CMSA site. And all the CPD will get accredited through the colleges of medicine. When you run your training, the face-to-face contacts therefore has to cover 12 hours of content to be able to get the 12 CPD points that's related to that. That 12 CPD points is going to be organized through Lucille. She does all of the work for that. And basically when people attend things, they will get 8 different badges basically over time. So for example, it is possible if you've got a consultant who can only come to day 1 and they've only done module 1 and 2, they will get badges for module 1 and 2. So if at a later training they join module 3 and 4, they will get the badges at that point. And so eventually over a year, if they collect their 8 badges, then the colleges of medicine will then give them their final short course certificate for SWAT, specifically on WBA. So this is a suggested program, very much a template. Again, you're going to precisely look at what's going on in your regards. There's 12 hours to cover. And then, of course, you need a little bit of time for all your lunches and your teas. We managed at Worcester to realize that actually the first day is a full 8 to 4 day. But the second day, actually, if you start at 8 o'clock, we were managing to finish quite comfortably by 3 o'clock. So again, you can look how you want to do it. The principle is that in the morning of the first day, you're doing module 1, in the afternoon, module 2. On your second day in the morning, you're doing module 3, and in the afternoon, module 4, which means you can also split this into 4 different half days. So once you decide you're going to start your training, at the moment, I think most universities have decided to do the 2 full days in a row, but I wanted to show you that possibility of splitting it into 4 half days. So if you find at your university you cannot get 2 days in a row for people to actually attend, you can have like a full day in 1 week and then a full day in another week, for example, or you can even organize 4 separate afternoons from 2 to 5 or 3 to 6 or 4 to 7. And again, because it is modular, people can actually attend them as one-offs. They don't have to attend them. They can miss one and attend another one, for example. So these are the lovely adverts that Lucille will help you create. So once you know what the times are, you'll send it to her. She'll organize the advert for you. And you'll see she includes a link on that advert through which people will be able to register. So once they register, Lucille will get all the registrations. What we did with Worcester is I wanted vaguely to keep track of who'd registered. So she kept me up to date as people were registering. And then we've created a standard welcome email that also includes that Learn at CMSA link on how you go online and explaining how the online component works. So it's important to I found it's really important to take the pressure off, that people don't have to complete the material before they come to the training. We did find about 3/4 people have actually had done some of the material, so people do try, but that we don't want this to become a barrier to people actually coming to the face-to-face training. We've also created a little basic SWAT WBA participant manual that sort of explains how the whole training work. You're very welcome to also adapt that for your particular university and include that if you wanted to that welcome email. So Lucille will then send that out as people register. And then it's always a very good idea 2 days prior to the training to send a last final reminder email. So at our training, which was quite frustrating, we had 8 people happily booked, and there were 6 people who then, or 5 people who didn't show up, and then another one that showed up out of the blue, and only one of them actually told us that they were not going to come, and that's quite frustrating because we're obviously organizing food, etc., etc. So I think hopefully a last reminder might prompt them to let you know if they've suddenly decided not to come. The next thing is, once you know the dates of your training, is to figure out who's going to teach which module. It makes sense to divide the 4 module up between your different facilitators, depending on who you have and which areas they feel comfortable with. There's somebody that also can run the introductions and the WBA exercise in the morning when we start. Then there's the 4 modules. We found the way forward discussion that happens in the last module works very well as part of module 4, because we found a lot of the discussion was already happening throughout the morning. So the whole day there was already a lot of planning and discussion around WBA, and then we just pulled it together in that last module. And that also made it possible to finish a little bit earlier. So where you're going to find all your stuff, once you know where it is, there's a Google Drive at the moment, but myself and Catherine, we're making good progress in creating also all this material on the Learn at CMSA site that will be specifically for trainers. But this is just to give you an example. If you go into that Google folder and you go into module 1, there's a place where you'll find all the printing and handouts. And then there's different sets of slides, and you can look at the slides, decide which ones you want to use, and of course, adapt as much as you need to. And if people over time adapt slides or bring new slides or new ideas, we can add this to the resource, and people are welcome to then create their own slides. Every module has a training manual please look out for those, because they also give you a little bit of a nice overview of how that particular module is run. So whoever's looking after module 1 can then use that to help themselves prepare. Just some administrative tasks before the training actually happens. So you all need to arrange the venue. I think most of us will have a venue within the university that you hopefully won't have to pay for. And then usually the venues have their own caterers. So we just put them in touch with Lucille, and Lucille organized all the catering. We forgot to organize the flip chart with markers. So please make sure your venue organizes them. Luckily, we were able to get some on the day. You're obviously going to create that program for the day. You need that quite early because the caterers need to know what time they're going to provide the tea and the lunches, for example. Lucille will organize the attendance register. So once she's got everybody that's registered, she will send you an attendance register that's already pre-filled, which is quite useful. The big thing you need to get your head around is the printing of the handouts, and I'll show you the printing list just now. And you'll need to see what works for you. So if your university has got a printing setup and they can just print everything for you, that's great. At our university, the resource center was willing to print for us at R1 a page, which is quite reasonable. And then they sent the invoice to the SAFP who covered that. The evaluation form, so there's a nice generic evaluation form that Lucille can also provide you with, that you can just use a QR code so people can do that at the end of the 2 days. I was quite keen with our training to get a very granular level of input to help us plan our next training. And so I've got a much more detailed one that we used on a Google form, and that the PDF version of that is in the administrative folder if you wanted to have a look at it. But otherwise, the one with Lucille works absolutely beautifully. Name tags I almost completely forgot about until like the morning, and then realized I had some very old ones, like plastic ones that I could recycle. But it might be useful even if you just get stickers that people can stick on with and a marker pen. So it's quite nice to be able to get to know each other's names over the 2 days. So this is you'll see in the administrative folder, in that Google folder, there's an administrative checklist. So what I'm showing you is all the stuff that's on that checklist that you can use to make sure you stay on track. And I've summarized all the tools that potentially can be printed. And again, you can decide what fits into your particular training. So there's printing instructions. So some pages you can do 2-sided, which saves you a bit of money. Some of them has to be 1-sided if you're going to do group work, for example. And you will work out how many copies you need for the 20 people. But I'll show you a little bit the handouts as we go through the modules. This is just an easy thing. If you are going to ask somebody to print for you, you can send them, you can edit this to work for you and then give it to the person who's going to do all the printing for you with the original soft copies. And then on the day, very simple. Once all of that has happened, you'll just need your attendance register there for participants to sign in. Because it's 4 modules with 4 different badges, they need to be able to sign in the morning, in the afternoon, on both days. And for example, one of our emergency guys literally could only come on the Friday morning. So he's only signing for that morning, and he'll get his CPD for that morning. The name tags obviously can get given out then. And it's helpful in the morning to make sure that the correct caterer has the correct times for the teas and lunch. I find that very frustrating if you're trying to take a break and lunch is not there yet. So just make sure that you're all on the same page. So that's just a little bit ideas from me in terms of setting up the administration. Lucille, is there something I've left out that you would like to add at this point? And then also if anybody has any questions, you can put a hand up or put things in the chat.
No, Dr. Madeleine, I think you've covered everything quite accurately. I just noted on the attendance register, so if I hear what you're saying, I need to add additional slots so that people can sign in
Yes, I actually
on
did that.
various times.
For the one you sent me, I just added 2 columns.
Okay.
Or just 1 column for just 1 column actually, so that I've had a module 1, so that they could mark for both module 1 and module 2, and then on the Friday for module 3 and module 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so that worked quite nicely. Is there any questions at the moment, just from an administrative point of view?
I see we have a hand.
Yes, Tashni,
2.
please go ahead.
So my hand was up second, I think, but if it's okay with the other person, I'll go ahead. I just
Yes.
wanted to ask, so they're basically signing, so I think I'm struggling to book a venue for the second full day.
Okay, yes.
Because I mean I literally looked and I went through all the venues at UCT and I was like, okay, the one full day is possible, but the second day, if I do it the following day, that's an issue. So I might have to separate the days per week.
Oh,
I'm hoping that's still going to be possible,
yeah.
but it would allow more flexibility. So do they have to sign the CPD register for each module? So let's say
Yeah.
someone can do the morning but not the afternoon. It just, yeah, so they have to sign per
So
module. Is that right?
exactly. That's right. So that's the way it works. So for example, we had an emergency medicine guy who could only do the morning. So he's only got module 3 and he missed the afternoon one, and he'll catch that up some other stage. The other thing you can also do is that, for example, you can either then organize that module 4 on a different day at a different time, or you could have a webinar version of module 4 one evening to complete the course. So it's very flexible depending on what's going to work for you, but you're very welcome to run it as a day and a half. That shouldn't be a problem at all, as long as we sign for each of the separate 3-hour modules. Gefilwe, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, thank you, Madeline. Yeah, I don't know if I heard you correctly because I joined a little bit late. Did
No
you
problem.
say for the trainees, pre-reading is not necessary?
So we're not calling it pre-reading. We are calling it an asynchronous online module.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a course that's made up of 24 CPD points. 12 hours you can do online in your own time, and 12 hours you can do is the contact sessions. And I did encourage and remind people, especially the first module and the third module, if they can look at the videos, that's very helpful. And obviously I send them all that saboteur self-assessment beforehand, but even that they can do on the day. And I did find that about 3/4 of the people, and we only advertise 2 weeks in advance, actually looked at the online material. So people generally do go and engage. But as soon as you make it a prerequisite, then you might have people who don't get round to it, and then they're either stressed or they don't show up. So they can do it in their own time. And then I find what's happened is if people didn't do any stuff and then they've at your 2 days, when they go back to the online stuff, it's very nice because it then reinforces the things that they've experienced in the course and sort of deepens their knowledge. So it doesn't seem like it's an impediment if they haven't done the online materials first.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Madeleine, a question in the chat. So even if you don't have 20 people, do you still continue with the training?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, we ended up having 14, and that's just the way it rolled. But yes, definitely. I mean, there's no reason to cancel just because you don't have enough people. What we'll probably do, and what I'm curious about, is we are going to look at webinar versions so that we can, so if you want to sort of have people that didn't make it or weren't able to come, that you can actually have other ways that people can access the course if you want to get your numbers up, but you're struggling to get everybody into a room. One of the challenges I had is that we were very particular in who we invited because we knew we had these 20 people we could cater for. So we were very specific in which departments we invited, and we sort of focused on the departments that was already doing WBA, etc. And then unfortunately, we got exactly the amount of people we wanted, and then a bunch of them didn't show up. And then I was quite frustrated because I could have invited, there was other departments we could potentially have invited. And now it's this question of, and Lucille could help us with there, do you overbook the airplane in case there are people that don't show up? And that might be a little bit of a useful discussion, that you don't have a scenario where there's people you could have invited. The other option is you invite everybody and then you take the first 20 who sign up. But I don't know. I would be happy for ideas on how one actually get free trainings. Is always a nightmare in terms of actually getting the numbers right. So I don't know what you think about overbooking.
Well, I always try, for example, UKZN, if I can use them as an example, they're running with their they've booked all their training for the year in advance. So they are marketing their training for the whole year. So people are applying for training that's happening in March, June, July, and August. So I need to really keep track of what's happening. But for their first training session, they're running at 22, 23 people already.
Okay. Excellent.
So I'm catering for because we haven't closed off for the registration yet, because the venue allows for them to actually take in additional people in the first round, which is fine. So it's difficult because you normally have somebody that doesn't pitch. And it also depends on the type of catering that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. There was
Okay. I see we have some more hands.
yes. I think Richard and then Taslim.
Well, I'm partly covered. Thank you. I mean, just a reflection on our pilot from Joburg, Madeleine.
Yes.
The other limiting factors can be the number of the venue capacity, and secondly, the are there any activities? Just thinking about it, are there any activities that essentially limit the number of the ratio of facilitators to numbers of attendees? You with me?
Yeah.
Those are two other aspects. You might comment. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think every training will. I think for us, it's just you want to sort of not end up paying for more meals or not have enough food. For me, that was the only issue. In the end, who you get is who you get. But yeah, I think that's always a challenge with trainings. Taslim, some thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for Madeline. Your work's looking excellent. Thank you very much for leading the charge here. So I think it might be useful to look at, going a little bit over 10% over 22, 23 people. That might be useful. You're always going to get late cancellations. These are clinicians, so I think that might be pragmatic. And if you do end up with a full house attending, then that's not a train smash, is it? Like having 2 or 3 extra people.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Tasneem, your issue with the venues. I think if you're really struggling, UCT has a perennial shortage of venues for large-ish groups of people. I mean, we could allocate funding for an off-campus venue. It's a little bit costly in Cape Town. All of the venues are costly in Cape Town, especially if you're wanting to be close to Grooteskier. But I think, contact Melissa or Manisha and they could help source. And if it's within budget, we can rather do that than postpone because we've got venue issues.
No, I'm definitely not postponing. So what I've done at the moment is I've got 1.5 days, but I'm thinking that obviously it's not enough because you need the 12 hours. So I'm going to look and see if I can book 8 days over the course of the year and just book it in advance, and then see how that works. But 8 separate days, so maybe 1 week apart.
That's a good idea.
But I'm going to have a look at that tonight, and if I struggle, I will contact you.
Great.
All right. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
And Vina?
Hi. Thanks, Madeline. Firstly, I agree. Thank you so much for all of the updates and even for having the session. We are really grateful, especially since we're hoping to hit the road running next week. What I want to ask is just 2 very quick questions. Thanks. One is, okay, this is just playing around a little bit, right? In terms of, I don't know how stuck we are of ours. So our clinicians requested that if we could start a bit later in the morning so they can complete the ward rounds and, some clinical stuff, and then come to us, and we'll have a working lunch and a working tea. And that gives me 10 hours if I take out the, allocation of lunches and teas. And that was what I'm asking you. We're allowed to do that, right?
So you can do anything that you think your people can manage. The way I find it very useful to think in terms of 4 3-hour sessions.
Yeah.
And I must say the 3 hours are very interactive, and we got very good feedback from the participants about feeling enlivened and invigorated, and it's very easy to do as working lunches. But you can look at having little 3-hour sessions with small breaks. So if you think in terms of 3 hours, you can plot those 3 hours any way you want, as long as you don't break up the actual modules. I think each 3 hours needs to sit as a unit, but you can cut and paste them as you need to.
Yeah, because if I look at the training program, the 12 hours includes the breaks, right?
Yeah. No, it doesn't, unfortunately. So it's 4 3-hour sessions over 2 days.
Oh, I got you. Shoot. Okay, all right. Then I got to rework
the one we did, because it's 12-hour CPD. So you have to show. So I'm just getting the template.
I was just playing around with the way that we did it and I realized.
We didn't do the full 12 hours.
Yes, we didn't do the 12 hours. So that is why I thought we could wiggle it. Okay, but I'll work around that. My next question is.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So just very quickly, since you've got this up, my next question was just basically around in terms of the way forward, right? And I don't know if you're going to come to this later, but whether we're going to have like a uniform strategy on the way forward for this.
So yeah, so what I think we'll do is I'm going to go through each of the modules quickly now. In terms of unified strategy, in terms of the content of the trainings, we're going to leave that very flexible. So are you meaning in terms of a unified strategy in terms of the content of the modules, or are you just meaning in terms of the way we roll it out?
Yeah, the implementation, the roll it out, not the modules. I'm with you with the module.
Okay, so let's talk about that at the end.
Sure.
Just in terms of the way forward, because I think it's helpful if we've looked at the different modules and then we can just put them together.
Got you. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next module, so that let me just all the sharing stuff that one has to do. So when we start, there we go. Sorry, I'm just finding, I've got too many presentations open. Just give me 2 seconds. So I'm just going to go quickly through the different components.
Madeleine, are you going to excuse me quickly? You guys are right to
problem
carry
at
on.
all. I'm absolutely
Thank you.
sorted. Okay. So the first module that we do, the first is this Know Yourself, Your Learner, and but I also want to include in there this sort of little bit of introduction bit. So if you run the training as 4 3-hour modules, you might not have enough time to do lots of introductions and things like that. But if you're doing the 2 days, then you want a little bit of an introductory way of introducing the space. So I'm going to quickly just talk through that. So with the introductions, it was so lovely because Hanneke is really great with her amazing icebreakers, but we're not all great with amazing icebreakers. So I would really want to encourage you, if you're an icebreaker kind of person, please go and Google stuff and get exciting. We were very boring, but we found that this way of introductions actually worked extremely well. So we asked everybody to say who they were, obviously where they work and what they do and who they teach. And then we asked them to each speak of one aspect of being a clinical supervisor that inspires them. It can also be something they love about being a clinical supervisor, or a strength they have about being a clinical supervisor. You can decide what you want to bring into the room. And what was really nice about that is we got a little bit of a feeling for everybody on how they feel about their role in teaching. And it was very inspiring. And really, you could see we actually had some very we sort of were all able to appreciate what's amazing about being a clinical supervisor. So this is a sort of a very non-edgy way of actually doing your introductions, and worked quite well. And it's quite quick as well if you don't have much time. So we then quickly very much go through, so there's now 2 different ways, and this is just your rules for the meeting. So when Hanneke did a beautiful thing around the cupcake for Valentine's Days, around baking cupcakes, we tried a slightly different, slightly simpler exercise for our one. Both exercises are available on the Google folder. So again, you will pick one which you like, and I'll just show you the one that we did. So and we had a Babysitter Academy example exercise. So the idea is that you've got a 10-year wedding anniversary coming up, and you want to go away overnight, and you've got a 6-month-old baby, and you're needing a babysitter, and you contact the Bouncing Babies Academy, and they've got a lovely babysitter called Alex, and you now have to decide, she's just finished her training, she's fully certified, and are you going to leave your baby with Alex? So you call them up, and they've got entrustable professional activities of what is the activities that they think their babysitters are able to do. And then in buzz pairs, or you can have larger groups, you can decide how many you want to discuss. People must discuss about what they need to know about the teaching methodology and the assessment methodology of that course that will make them consider Alex as trustworthy enough to have their babies. What was quite funny is 2 of the participants had 6-7-month-old babies, and neither of them will leave their children with any babysitter under any circumstances. So we had some very interesting discussions around trust. So this is just a different exercise. Whichever exercise you use, whether it's the cupcake exercise, or can you bake a cupcake, or can you trust your babysitter, you can use that then to describe constructive alignment. And then you can link that then, the example, we link that example to our teaching methodology, which we're going to look at in module 2, how we're going to record activities, which will be module 3, and how we decide that they're trustworthy, which is module 4. So that's just a nice way to introduce your course. So that is very briefly on an introductory module. I don't know if anybody's got any quick questions about that, and that shouldn't take you longer than half an hour. So it's a very quick way to sort of almost like an icebreaker, but it also brings the concept of trust very firmly into the room. I don't know if there's any questions. So I'm going to see if there's something in the chat that I haven't seen. Oh, that's just, yeah, Richard has just stepped out. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop sharing this one. We want to move quite quickly now. Great. So the next module then is this module 1, the know yourself, your learner, and your environment. And I think what's become very clear with me is that lots of people are very inspired with this module, but it is very new. It's very different than any other thing that we normally do in trainings. So we normally don't bring this much self-reflection into medical trainings. And I must say also at the East London one, people find this, they get very invigorated by this training. And so I've adjusted it extensively, and what I've done is I've built it into 7 exercises that you're basically going to do with them. So you'll see we've made a full 3 hours available for that. It's mostly interactive, so people would have either watched the online content, but even if they don't watch the online content, you'll easily be able to briefly introduce a concept, and then they're simply going to do an exercise around that. If you're preparing for module 1, there are a couple of things that needs to get printed. So the one is an actual worksheet that I've created. It's sort of a know yourself reflection worksheet. It's 8 pages, 2-sided, and all 7 exercises are printed on that worksheet. So actually everybody will sit and work through their worksheet throughout the 3 hours, and that really nicely structures that session. I think also you don't have to print out the counterproductive behaviors, because that's also it's part of the Learn at CMSA site. People can also download their own copies, but I find it quite nice to have that as a printed copy in front of people, especially if they haven't spent much time on the online material, but that's completely up to you. Just a small thought while I think of it. To be able to do this module, you have to do the saboteur self-assessment. It's really quick. It takes 5 to 7 minutes. So what I have done is when people arrived in the morning, I had this QR code up on the projector. And then I asked people if they hadn't yet done the saboteur self-assessment to quickly do it now while they were settling in, or and while they were arriving. And so by the time we actually got to the exercise, everybody had done the assessment, and that worked very well. That saying, the vast majority of people had already done the assessment. So it does seem like we shouldn't underestimate our poor participants. So great. So I'm not going to run through the actual slides. I just want to show you the concept. So there's going to be an introduction where you're going to teach just these 2 modes and how it's linked to our different emotions and how those emotions are linked to specific behaviors. So that's the core of emotional competence. You're either stressed or not stressed. That creates either positive or negative emotions, and those negative emotions especially is going to lead to potentially counterproductive behaviors. So it's a very simple introduction. And that brings us to emotional competence, which has to do with how we manage our emotions and these behaviors. Easy. So now we're going to go through the 7 exercises. So the first exercise is specifically focusing on knowing your saboteurs. So you're going to ask people that have done the reflection, and then this is all written for them as well on that self-exercise sheet. So we were able to do it. They just do it on their own. They're not going to discuss this with each other because this can get quite personal dragons are a little bit embarrassing. And so you're going to take them through an exercise of imagining themselves either with a junior colleague, which was with a difficult conversation, or either a partner or a child even, and then being able to identify the mode, the emotion, the behavior, and the impact of those behaviors. That's exercise 1. Exercise 2 is looking at unconscious bias and power dynamics. So there's a short introduction. And then the exercise is actually circling for each one of these 12 qualities, whether you have whether your unearned advantage or disadvantage gives you more power or less power in society in terms of changing things in the world around you. So what's quite interesting is that people then circle which ones are applicable to them, and then they must pick 2 or 3 that are, or ones that's not like them at all. So if you are a cisgendered male, how do you feel about transgender people? If you are, if you've got owned property, how do you feel about the homeless person down the road, for example? And then there's a little exercise to really study and understand how you will act on for example, creating policies for people that are in that marginalized communities. Just a reminder that all these exercises are fully recorded in terms of explaining what they are and how to do them, and that's going to be that's also available in the training manuals. So your third exercise is on dual awareness. So this is an exercise where we become aware of our own thinking. Again, there will be a description in the videos, and this very long lengthy slide here is literally something you're going to read out to the participants while they are sitting, and it's just almost like a meditation where you split away from yourself and you observe yourself in the context of your life, and it's a very nice exercise to get to a point where you can feel compassion for who you are and also for other people that you encounter when you get into that dual awareness mode. The fourth exercise is actually an exercise where you deal with that high levels of adrenaline, and we actually teach a little mindfulness exercise. Again, the details is in the recordings. This is a very nice exercise called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you just focus on very particular things in your environment. And this is something you can do with your group. Within each person does it, on their own, and also, and then what I find is after the exercises, you can open up a little bit of time for discussion. So that's your sort of studying yourself. That's got most of the exercises, so 4 of the exercises. The second section is looking at the learning environment and toxic workplaces. There's some introductory slides that has to do with medical error, and these depreciative and appreciative work environments. That's all pretty straightforward. And then the exercise, this has been a nice exercise, which actually then one of my colleagues who facilitated then created a little Google form at her workplace to get everybody in the workplace, including the juniors, to actually, this is just the background of the exercise, but to actually if you look at your environment and consider it from the perspective of the juniors in your department, would you consider that learning environment toxic, just unpleasant, maybe neutral, not awful, not great, quite nice, or an awesome place to work at, and trying to identify the factors that might be putting you at whatever level you are at. This definitely is a very nice exercise then to take into discussions where people can talk about their workplaces and why they think their workplaces are like that. Exercise 6 is now actually, what do we do about these toxic work environments? So there's a little bit of background. And then now what you do, again, now people will actually discuss if their work environment was at a level 3 or 4 or whatever, to think about what kind of intervention at work could actually improve that learning environment. And then the last section is on the registrar specifically. It talks a little bit about the registrar and difficulty. That's quite nice for discussion, this section. Lots of people have got comments on registrars they're struggling with. And then the exercises around appreciative inquiry, which we didn't do at all at the course. So I would please ask you to go and look at the slides. But appreciative inquiry is quite a nice technique that one can use to, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, on how you flip that difficult conversation into an appreciative, generative, powerful conversation. So you'll see again the theories in the video, but basically what you do is you have an exercise where you Think about, you need to talk to a registrar who's, for example, always late. You think about what it is that you don't want them to do. This is in your own head before you see them. They're always late for work. Flipping it into a positive opposite. You want them to arrive on time, and then actually framing it into a positive outcome. And then after that, actually having a real curious generative question to help them figure out and how we're going to get there. So this is also a nice exercise to then sit and do, that they each can sit in little groups as well, thinking about a junior in their department that's having a behavior that's difficult. They're going to have to call them in for a meeting, and beforehand writing out how they're actually going to open that conversation and create that generative question. So that is basically the whole module. It works very nicely in the 3 hours, and that's at quite a slow pace with enough time for discussion and reflection. Any questions specifically before I share on module 1? Okay, great. And yeah, this is the one we've micromanaged the most, I guess, because it's so new. But you're also very welcome as you develop your own work. You might find that you bring your own aspects or even your own exercises into that. Okay. So we're now going to look at module 2. So module 2 is the feedback module. That's the one that happens in the afternoon or wherever you're going to slot it in. It takes a little bit less than the 3 hours. So we actually made a little bit extra time in the morning for our introduction and the emotional competence one. And then the afternoon module, you can get away with two and a half hours with a little bit of conclusion and feedback at the end as well. So there are 2 possible role plays that you can do. There's the Pendleton. The 1 minute preceptor, we didn't do that one either at this one. You can decide. We'd end up spending a lot of time discussing the Pendleton. What we did is I gave out the 1 minute preceptor for people if they want to go and use it as an exercise within their own departments. If you get feeling very puzzled in how to create the groups, I've tried to make it like a little bit bomb-proof. So you'll see there's a role play exercise group division colors. That's literally this one you can cut out. And whether you've got 3 people or 4 people, it gives you exact instructions. So you're just going to give everybody a little card that will tell them exactly which person they're playing in which scenario. And they just follow the instructions, basically. So the slides themselves there's not very many slides. You'll see this all looks familiar. We've slightly restructured them to make them quite simplified. You can decide how much extra content you want to add in. And so it's just basically positives, negatives, and how you do it. And then a little bit of time on the feedback models. So you can decide how much detail you want to cover on the different feedback models depending on who is with you. So just to remind you, the R2C2 model is what you use when you're actually calling a learner in for an assessment. For example, somebody who has failed an exam or somebody who's not going to be progressed. Your SNUPS is a tool that you're going to teach the registrars on how to present their patients. Pendleton is the one we spent so much time on at the course and is probably the one that people will use the most. And the 1 minute preceptor is very lovely to use while somebody's discussing a case. So again, there's slides to help you discuss the different models. And then you're basically going to go on to the role play. So in the afternoon, you literally have like half an hour, 45 minutes for going through the slides and a bit of discussion. And then you're going to use those scripts. We did also get feedback at the training, and yes, there's definitely an overwhelming, most people are very happy with the idea of using the scripts. And certainly there was a lot of discussion, especially because the cases all have issues also around safety in terms of when and how the supervisor actually interferes. Great. Is there any questions on the feedback on module 2? Yeah, I think those were fairly straightforward. Let me get my next slides.
Elaine, how many facilitators did you have in the session?
So we had 3 people for the whole 2 days. In that session, I ran that pilot in NMU last year, and I did it on my own. You don't actually need a lot of facilitators around. So everybody sits in their little group of 3 and do their own thing. And then when they've, for each case, after they finished, we'd have a discussion, and I wandered around and sort of prodded people to think about stuff like, would you interfere if this lady is bursting out in tears and is, the registrar's traumatizing her, and at which point do you step in? And so you can interact. So you actually only need 1 person in the room, but we were 3, so the 3 of us were there for the 2 days.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so luckily none of the exercises require vast amounts of facilitators around. All of the sessions can be run by a single person for that particular module, which makes it a little bit easier. So we're now going to look at module 3, which is specifically on WBA, the nuts and bolts. So what happened is when we had the training in Johannesburg, a big focus of that was actually just getting questions and ideas. And it was actually very useful because we could see what people were clear on and what people were not so clear on. So I think, and because people were actually it was quite an advanced group in terms of previous experience with WBA. So we structured ours a little bit differently, that we did start off with covering the basic terminology. So we adjusted the slides. Again, this is just in the morning of the Friday that we did this. The only thing you need to print out, and it's helpful to have the printed out actual generic tool, the WBA tool. But then also they're going to actually fill it in on a jot form so they can see what it's like to fill it in on a tool. So in terms of the slides, you'll see there's a WBA 101 slides, which is literally, I've taken it through what is the EPA, what is the WBA, apologies for my animations, what is an entrustment decision, what is an e-portfolio, what is a clinical competency committee. You won't spend much time on this, but it's quite nice to just complete all the terminologies. This is how it all hangs together. And then you're going to go straight into explaining how you're going to capture your actual WBA. So who completes what on the tool, and what activities are on there. And you've got the paper tool to look at. So once people know what they're doing, we just showed this as an example because at WUSU, our own e-department is literally in the last month introduced the WBA app using the one that Daniel Nell and them are developing. They've created one specifically for their department. But we actually then gave them the jot form. So this jot form, Lucille is able to, I just gave her a heads up. And what Lucille actually did is she sent me then the Excel sheet of everybody filling in their work-based assessments. We used the feedback from the previous day to fill that in there, sort of little role plays that they did on the previous day. And then what I did was I very quickly just took out showed them the entrustment decision, the positive feedback, what you can do better, and the action plan, because that's what a dashboard will look like, to just show people what it will look like. And I showed them that data in the afternoon. So if you want to, you can actually access the data that the people are filling in. So this created a lot of discussion. As a matter of fact, I think that took up the bulk of the session, because now people will start talking about what's happening in their departments, what they've experienced, what they think will work, what they think will not work. So this is a very good time to really bring the interactive side in. Once you've had quite a bit of discussion, one can get into the nitty-gritty to start thinking in terms of their department, what opportunities do they have for WBA. We didn't spend a lot of time on this, but each discipline will be different in what is their best way and what combination of these four. And you want to try and get as many different types of WBAs, but some disciplines, some kinds of WBAs will be more, will lend themselves more to that discipline. So it just goes through those, and that also creates a bit of discussion. And then we did have enough time to do the debate. So we divided the group into, we first asked who thinks we're actually going to be able to roll quite soon, or who thinks, no, this is going to be a disaster. And then we had a little for and against debate. So everybody sat in groups, they discussed the barriers and enablers, and then we captured those on the flip charts. And this was a very lovely way to also bring up questions and solutions. And that's basically the WBA nuts and bolts sessions. Any questions about that? And you can see there's not a lot of slides that one has to plow through. Most of it is going to be around interaction, which makes it a very nice training. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm just going to bring up the last one. So Module 4 is specifically on entrustment and the clinical competency committee. So I think when we had the training in February, there was a lot of overlap. We were sort of moving the concepts around. So for example, Hanneke, when she did her introduction on the first day, was already talking about validity and reliability. So what we actually did is we took all of the slides on entrustment out of the different sessions, and I put all of them into Module 4. Because actually we have a lot more time than we did at the February training to fill these 4 3-hour sessions. So these slides, you'll see they'll look familiar, but they've been particularly ordered for this entrustment. So this is now on your Friday afternoon. And yeah, this session also, as I say, you can actually put these sessions whenever you need to. The other thing I realized is the big activity in this module is the role play exercises. So the role play comes as originally came as like a 5-page document, but some pages you print for every person and some pages you just print for the group leader. And so what we've done is we split them into 2 documents. The one is you're going to print one for each group, and is the page that goes to the chairperson, and then the page you're going to cut up for each of the roles of the different people. And then the other page has got the EPAs on for that particular clinical competency committee meeting and the portfolio of the registrar you're looking at, and everybody needs to have each of those to look at. So that's just an easy way to help organize your printing. And then you'll see the slides is all based around trust, what trust is. That's from Tenkate. We talked about those terms, formative, summative, and continuous. This is a good place to have that discussion around feedback and trust. And this just shows how the whole exam comes together. So how your staff for each EPA is going to interface with our end-of-year CMSA exams, the MEDs, and how that's going to come together. Then we look a little bit at ad hoc entrustment decisions. So using these 4 different types of WBAs to make an entrustment decision. And then there's a few slides. This is the lovely slides from Bob Mash, specifically around understanding how all of these data points is going to be interfacing with these 6 monthly clinical competency committees, and then talking around what is validity, what is reliability, and then he's got this beautiful slide to explain aggregation, saturation, and triangulation of the data in terms of the validity and specifically of the reliability of our exams. You can decide how much of the slide you want to cover. You only really need to compare the OSCE to the work observations, because those are the 2 things that specifically potentially is looking at the same kinds of things. And then there's a little section on specifically competency committees. So what you do, what the local CCC does, what happens in that particular meeting, what they look at. And then the family physicians has got this lovely tool that we've been using when we look at each registrar, and that you sort of use to assess your particular registrar. And then there's a brief slide on understanding the national clinical competency committees. So we then had the simulated CCC exercise. So at the training, they were quite organized. I didn't realize it until we got to module 4, is that they gave some people the chairs to actually look at the chairperson sort of report before, the night before. We found that we forgot, but it doesn't actually matter, because remember, we've got much more time to cover entrustment than we did at the February training. So there's more than enough time for each people to sit and read and look through everything together. But we also find one of the facilitators had said, yes, at the previous training, she was one of the sort of chairs allocated the night before, but we haven't discussed entrustment or clinical competency committees yet. And so she was a bit lost. So it's actually useful once you've discussed what actually all these different terms mean, for people to then sit and interrogate this EPA and interrogate this portfolio. And that worked very nicely. And you've got a good half an hour, 40 minutes for this exercise. There's more than enough time. So just, I have always remembered to have your QR codes ready for your training when you get to the end. Oh, and I just remember also what we did then at this point. So then we got actually to the end of the training. And then we had a very much where we had a discussion in the way forward. And what we did is we looked with each of the disciplines in the room and we checked with them. So are you aware of any EPAs, for example, for pediatrics, or you're not aware of EPAs? Are you aware of a WBA tool that's already being used in or that you would want to use or play with? For those who don't have any WBA tools yet, we talked about incorporating feedback already into their registrar trainings, even if they're not filling in tools. Then we talked a little bit about where are the different disciplines at in terms of e-portfolios and the capturing of that data. And then we looked at also which of the disciplines has already heard about clinical competency committees or might be setting up clinical competency committees, etc. So there was a very nice practical way at looking how WBA is going to become visible within the specific disciplines within the East London hospitals where we were setting. I think, yeah, that's everything for me on that module. Any questions? And this might, maybe at this point, we can talk a little bit also when we're talking about way forward with implementation. I don't know if there was any specific questions that you had.
Hi, Madeline. You know,
Yes.
we have a bit of a problem because I can't do both days next week. So we've had to adapt it. So I'm going to do module 1 and 3 and 4 probably, because
Okay.
you know my strength is obviously in EPAs and WBAs.
Yeah.
And then I think day 2 Bina will do with Gloria in Kabinda, who's done the
Yeah.
TCT. So so I think, do you think we can fit in the 3 modules in one day?
I wouldn't recommend that. It's really good for each of the modules took us the full 3 hours. Otherwise, you're going to have to cut things out. From a CPD point of view, you're supposed to cover a full 12 hours. So more than 6 hours in a day gets a bit much. But you can also stand things over for other days. And then, for example, even the feedback module and the only modules, Morgan, where you might have to do them is, for example, the clinical competency committee one. But we found like Busi Mkhacha, she ran the feedback one, the feedback module, for example. And she's not had, she's very new in terms of training this kind of a thing. And she was able to manage that module very well. So
well, Bina is an expert in feedback and stuff. So
exactly. So I think if you're there on one day, pick the 2 modules that you feel comfortable on teaching and hand over to somebody else for the next day. The order, bizarrely enough, doesn't matter too much. It's kind of nice to have the feedback module before you have the WBA module, because people are going to fill in that JOT form on the observation of a consultation. But you can also get a little video of a consultation that everybody observes and then fill in the feedback form. So it's not actually a train smash at all. But all modules are all, the only module that's probably good to have right at the end is the clinical no, not even. The modules actually can stand completely on their own, each of them, and you can do them in any order that you want. It doesn't actually make a difference.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've just published a nice article on clinical competency committee. It's just been accepted by the JCMSA, so I'll share it when it's out.
That's very
from
exciting.
our experience in South Africa. So both for local and for national CCC meeting, for CCC committees. Thanks, Madeline.
Yeah, so feel free, but I think we also shouldn't feel too much pressure that if you're struggling to get all 4 modules into this particular section, I'm very interested in having even just one of the modules end up being an online 3-hour webinar, one evening or one afternoon, to be able to complete all the badges. So the interactive sessions does not have to be face-to-face. They can also be online, and they all 4 lend themselves to that. We're going to have to get creative to get clinicians to these trainings and facilitators. It's quite an exercise. Any other questions in terms of planning the way forward? And any last questions about the training? Oh, that was exactly an hour.
So the evaluation, will Lucille help us with that?
Yes, so I was mentioning, Morgan, there's a nice jot form like the one we did at the last training. So
Yeah.
then you just show the QR code on the last day. And what I did is I did not let them leave the room until they've all filled it in. What's quite nice is,
Right.
yeah, so, but I wanted a lot more feedback than is on the jot form. So we had our own little evaluation form that we did, and we did one for day one. So at the end of day one, I got them all to sit in, and I've added in the what went well and what can you do better, so they can
Mm.
practice giving feedback on that form. And then I did another one on day two, so that I got a bit of a more of a granular feel for each of the modules rather than having them look at all 4 modules at the end of day. So I've uploaded what they looked like. They were 2 Google Forms I've created in the administrative pack, but you can look at what works easiest for your facility and what you need.
Okay, so and then the next one was Daniel Nell's
Yes,
form. So we printed a copy of his. I see in the pack that we've got a copy of
yes.
his.
So it's a nice
So we
little
printed,
print.
and they would use a printed version.
No, so
and then the online version.
Yeah, so there is an online jot form. So the printed version is nice for them to look at when you talk about it, because they can sort of interact with it. But no, there is the jot form again, because we want people to feel what it's like to fill it in on your phone. That's very
Right,
helpful.
okay.
That brings a lot of.
Is that been linked to Daniel Nell or linked to Lucille?
No, that's linked to Lucille. So I just gave
Okay.
Lucille a ring, and then she sent me the Excel sheet. And then
Okay,
over
great.
lunch, you can look at the Excel sheet before, there's a break between the 2 modules. And then you just show the Excel sheet and just show people a little bit what it looks like when you look at the entrustment decision, what went well, what can be done better, and the way and the action plan. And see what
so maybe we can ask some of the ask people to do it, and Lucille can aggregate it and send us the Excel spreadsheet.
Yes, Prof. All Madeleine does, she just sends me a WhatsApp to say, heads up, we're going to send out the link now, or the people are filling it in, and I know more or less how many people you have in your training session. So I watch as the feedback comes in, and when I see that everybody's done, I send you the Excel spreadsheet.
So Morgan, we did that. Everybody filled it in, and that got all the discussion going. So they've got the physical one, so we can talk about it. But the jot form, there's a little QR code that they just scan. It's in the presentation. So they scan the QR code, they all fill it in on their phones. And then we even timed them so they could see actually how long it takes. The only thing you have to explain to them is when they fill it in, is that they're filling in both the registrar section as well as their own. Because normally what happens with the app is the registrar is already filled in half, and they're just sending you the link to fill in the rest. But it's also
so
good
we're using those exercises that we had in class.
Yes, exactly.
Those cases, and are they doing it? Are they doing it for all 3 cases?
No, they pick anyone they want. Yeah.
Okay.
They pick anyone they want, and then it's just a nice way for them to see. Especially around the narrative feedback. There's quite a lot of discussion on how much detail do you put in, and so it's very nice to trigger conversation. And we found most of the conversation happened after they filled in that form, and that really helped them to put things together. And that happens in module 3.
Right.
When we do the WBA.
Excellent.
So by the time you hit the class in the afternoon, you've already got that data points to also help them look at.
So those cases are also in that module, okay? So we can print those cases before.
So module 2 is the role plays. On the role plays, that's when you do the feedback. And then on the WBA nuts and bolts is when you then actually fill in the form after the feedback. If you're in a scenario where you have to swap the 2 around, then I'm sure one can get a little video of we're going to actually record ones for the online ones. Like you get a little consultation video, you can get a short one even of a terrible consultation of a registrar with the patient, and you just play that. They must watch it and they must fill in the form. So don't get stressed if you have to swap around module 2 and 3.
Right. Good.
Depending on who's around when. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Madeleine.
Good luck. It's very exciting.
Thanks for all your efforts in trying to improve this course.
No, it's been very exciting watching it come together, and we had such nice feedback from the group. People were so inspired and so excited. It was really exciting. And then what we did is that we invited Ops and Gynae and Pediatrics and Anesthetics, all the departments that we're busy putting our registrars into. And the amount of
Right.
networking that happened was amazing. So it was very,
Right.
very.
Okay.
Lucille, you've unmuted. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Okay. Very exciting, guys. Good luck. Go forth and multiply. And the idea is that these little videos I'm going to obviously split up and record and add to each section. So if you are at your training in KZN, for example, next week, and you identify people that you want training on future trainings, they will have access to all of this materials to help you with your future trainings so that we can spread the love. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Madeleine.
Thank you.
Thanks,
much,
Madeleine.
everybody.
Bye.
Wow.